There is a saying in my village that a river does not forget its source, no matter how far it travels to the sea. But what happens when the source tries to forget the river? This is a story that has been whispered by the wind and carried on the wings of birds. A story of a child the world tried to discard, but who held a miracle in her voice. It began in a small, quiet town with a young woman named Adana. She was like a fresh flower, beautiful and full of life, married to Chike, a man who worked with lights and wires, an electrical engineer. Their life was a melody, simple and sweet. And at the center of that melody was their daughter Chiamaka, a little girl whose laughter could fill a room. Her name meant God is beautiful, and in her they saw their future. But melodies can be interrupted. The company where Chike worked closed its gates, and the steady hum of their prosperous life fell silent. The money grew tight, and the arguments grew loud. Adana, young and impatient, saw only the fading light, not the man struggling to relight it. The love she thought was deep was in fact a shallow pool, drying up under the first heat of hardship. She made a decision that would ripple through many lives. She left. She packed her dreams and her regrets, left a divorce letter for Chike, and entrusted her 3-year-old daughter Chiamaka to her sister, an auntie who lived not too far away. It will only be for a short while, she promised her sister, kissing Chiamaka's tear-stained cheeks, just until I find my feet in the big city. The big city was a different world, loud and fast. There, Adana met Emeka, a man with a confident smile and promises that glittered like gold. He offered her a new life, a stable one, and she clung to it. She agreed to marry him, and in doing so, she made a silent vow to bury her past. When Emeka firmly said, "We cannot bring a child from another man into our new home," Adana, in her desperate desire for this new beginning, agreed. At first, she would send money secretly to her aunt for Chiamaka's care, her guilt soothed by the naira note in an envelope. But as she gave birth to 2 new children for Emeka, a boy and a girl, the threads connecting her to her firstborn began to fray. The money became less frequent, then it became a trickle, and then it stopped completely. She convinced herself that Chiamaka was better off where she was, that her new family was her true destiny. Chike, her first husband, was shattered. The loss of his job was a heavy blow, but the abandonment of his wife and the absence of his daughter was a wound that went to the bone. He too decided to move on. He married a kind woman named Neka, and together they built a new life, filled with the cries and laughter of 3 new children. In the busyness of this new family, the memory of little Chiamaka, his first flower, was pushed into the quietest corner of his heart, almost forgotten. But for Chiamaka, there was no forgetting. Life with her aunt was a slow descent from neglect into a cold darkness. The aunt, a woman whose heart had been hardened by her own struggles, saw the little girl not as a niece to be loved, but as a burden to be borne. When the money from Adana stopped, so did the last shred of her aunt's patience. Chiamaka became the target of all her frustrations. The little girl who was once called God is beautiful was now called useless, a leech, and worse. She slept on a thin mat in a corner, her meals were often leftovers or nothing at all, and her days were filled with harsh words and harder chores. The light in her eyes began to dim, replaced by a quiet, constant fear. She learned to be small, to be silent, to be invisible. One day when Chiamaka was 6 years old, her aunt did something unspeakable. A famous crusade, a gathering of thousands upon thousands of people, had come to a vast open field in the city. The aunt, with a cunning plan forming in her mind, took Chiamaka there. The noise and the crowd were overwhelming. She held Chiamaka's small hand tightly, not out of love, but to ensure she didn't lose her before the right moment. As the final prayers echoed and the massive crowd began to disperse like a retreating tide, the aunt let go. She melted into the sea of people, leaving Chiamaka standing alone, a small,
lost island in a vast, emptying ocean. When the little girl finally realized she was truly alone, a terror colder than any she had ever known gripped her heart. She wept until no more tears would come. Back at home, her aunt wrote a letter to Adana, her pen dripping with lies. "Your daughter," she wrote, "was kidnapped in the crowd. I searched and searched, but she was gone." Meanwhile, as night fell over the crusade ground, a cleaner, sweeping near the massive podium, saw a small figure curled up, shivering. It was Chiamaka. He called his supervisor, who called the ushers, and finally the news reached the general overseer himself, a man named Pastor Samuel. He was a tall, kind-eyed man with a heart as large as his congregation. He came and knelt before the frightened child. "Little one," he said, his voice a soft rumble, "where is your mother?" Chiamaka, whose voice was a tiny whisper, could only say, "Auntie." She knew her aunt's name but had no idea of her address. Pastor Samuel's heart ached. They reported her case to the police, they announced it on the radio and in the newspapers, but no one came. It was as if the earth had swallowed her family whole. The police suggested an orphanage, but Pastor Samuel looked into the girl's eyes, saw the deep hurt, and a flicker of something else, a quiet strength, and he felt a divine nudge. He and his wife Mary had been unable to have children of their own. He turned to his wife and said, "This is our daughter." Mary, a woman whose love had long been waiting for a child to pour into, opened her arms and her heart. They named her Grace, for that is what she was to them, but they kept her giving name Chiamaka in the middle. She became Grace Chiamaka Samuel. In their home, she discovered what love felt like. It was in the warm meals, the soft bed, the gentle hugs, and the patient prayers. The frozen fear in her heart began to thaw. And then they discovered the miracle. It happened during a church rehearsal. Young Chiamaka, now about 8, was sitting in the front pew humming along to a hymn. A woman in the choir who had been suffering from a terrible persistent headache for days was standing near her. As Chiamaka's clear, angelic voice rose in song, a strange warmth spread through her. The pounding in her head simply just stopped. She was healed. At first they thought it was a coincidence, but it happened again. An elderly man with crippling arthritis in his hands listened to her sing a simple chorus, and the stiffness loosened, the pain vanished.
Pastor Samuel, a man of both faith and wisdom, watched this with awe. He realized that God had placed an extraordinary gift inside this abandoned child. It was not just that she could sing beautifully. It was that her voice was a conduit for divine healing. His love for her grew from a place of compassion to a place of sacred stewardship. He took it upon himself to nurture this gift. He found her the best vocal coaches. He taught her about the spiritual responsibility that came with such a power. He taught her to be humble, to give all glory to God. The more she grew, the more her gift blossomed. The story of the healing songbird began to spread. People started flocking to Pastor Samuel's church, not just from their city, but from neighboring states. The small church had to expand and expand again until it became a mighty cathedral, all because everyone wanted to be in the presence when Grace Chiamaka sang. Her adopted mother, Mary, watched her with immense pride, her love a fierce protective flame. Pastor Samuel spared no expense on her education. He sponsored her through the best music schools, first for a degree, then a master's degree. By the age of 24, Grace Chiamaka was not just a church sensation, she was a global celebrity. Her name was on billboards, her music videos on international television.
She ministered in massive arenas across Europe, America, and all over Africa. She had a voice that could shatter chains of sickness and despair. And through it all, she never changed her name. In 2 different homes, in 2 different cities, a flickering television screen brought a storm of shame and regret. Adana was in her living room with Emeka and their 2 teenagers, who were more interested in their phones than their future. A new segment featured the global gospel phenom, Grace Chamaka. The face on the screen was a beautiful, confident woman, but in the curve of her smile and the light in her eyes, Adana saw the ghost of the little girl she had left behind. The name Chamaka struck her heart like a physical blow. She let out a choked sob. The children she had with Emeka were ordinary, with no particular drive or remarkable talent. The future she had chased had led her to a dead end of regret. In another home, Chike sat with his wife Nneka and their 3 children. The same news segment came on. He stared, his mouth agape. This world-famous woman, this vessel of God's power, was his daughter. The daughter he had allowed himself to forget. He looked at his other children, good children, but none carried a spark that could light up the world like that. The glory he had abandoned for a new family now stared back at him from the television, magnified 1,000 times by fame and divine favor. Driven by a painful mix of shame and a desperate hope for reconciliation, they each, separately, found a way to trace her. They met her not as parents, but as penitent sinners. They wept and begged for forgiveness. Grace Chamaka listened to them, her heart calm. The wounds of the past had long been healed by the love of her adopted parents and her faith. She looked at them, these strangers who shed her blood, and she said the words that set her completely free. I forgive you. But then she added gently, firmly, however, the man who raised me, who nurtured the gift God gave me, who wiped my tears and showed me what a father's love truly is Pastor Samuel. He is my father. His wife is my mother. She acknowledged their biological link, but gave them no title. They had to return to their respective lives, forever living with the knowledge of the magnificent destiny they had thrown away. As for Grace Chamaka, her story continued to be written in gold. She married a man of high reputation, a respected leader in society, who loved God and cherished her. Their union was blessed, a partnership of purpose and deep affection. They built a foundation to help abandoned children, ensuring that her painful beginning would be a beacon of hope for others. So you see, my friend, the world may try to discard a precious stone, thinking it a common pebble. But a diamond does not lose its value because it is lying in the dirt. When it is finally discovered and polished, it will shine with a light that puts all other stones to shame. Never despise your humble beginning, for you do not know the greatness that God has hidden within you, waiting for the right time to sing.